Hey, 8th grade math students, Mr. Koenig back here again for the 114 Scatterplots real world application. This year we're going to try to make sure that you're seeing some applicability of what we're learning in class to the actual real world. Okay, sometimes you go through a class and you're like, how am I going to use this? Who uses that? Who uses this skill? What's it even for? And math is one of those subjects where it can be like that. And you're like, I don't know. How would I ever even use this, right? All right, let's look at how we can use scatterplots. At this point, hopefully you can make one, right? I'm not going to ask you, teacher's not going to ask you to make a scatterplot today. We're going to present you with some scatterplots that basically try to illustrate a relationship between a number of different risk factors for COVID-19 complications, whether that be mortality. You see that highlighted up there, the word mortality. That refers to death, or morbidity, which refers to illness. So maybe some vocabulary words you haven't heard before. So we're going to work through these scatter plots. The first one we're going to do is a focus lesson where we're going to show you kind of how I would analyze this and try to make sense of it. After that, we'll do one together. Your teachers will do one together with you in the class. And then there'll be several scatter plots for you to interpret either with a partner, on your own, as a team, however your teachers and however you're comfortable working that, okay? Well, let's look at the first one, scatter plot number 1, focus lesson, okay? For each of the problems today, you're essentially, the first thing you're going to do is determine the independent variable, which is always going to be, in this case, on the x-axis, and the dependent variable, which is going to be on the y-axis. All right? So this scatter plot shows the relationship between the independent variable blank. I look right here. Let's see right there. It says PCR test positivity percentage. So I'm going to type that in. PCR test positivity percentage. And the symbol for that is there. Hold that, make it stand out so you can see I determined what that is. And then our dependent variable in this case is actually mortality. Be a little more specific, so I'll type the word mortality, which again means death, per million population. Okay, so a ratio. Mortality per million people or population. So hold that. And there we go. We've determined our two variables. So what we're attempting to determine here is there a relationship between, I typed that wrong, PCR test, positivity percentage, and the mortality rate or death rate per million people. Here's a little background on this. You're like, what PCR test? What are you talking about? A PCR test is a test designed to detect the genetic material of a virus. In this case, COVID-19 virus. Positivity percentage refers to the percentage of people who test positive for the virus. For example, a data point at the X value of 10 indicates that for every 100 people tested for COVID-19, 10 of those people have positive tests. Okay, over here, 100%. That means if 100 people are tested, 100 of those people test positive. This would be a pretty high positivity rate, right? Each one is also going to ask you, this is kind of the most important part, is to actually look at the scatter plot and determine what's going on. Describe the relationship between the independent and dependent variable. What's going on here? Okay, so what I'm going to do is, they have this nice trend line in here, pretty convenient for us, is as I move from left to right, in general, this is an increasing PCR test positivity rate, right? So like here's a very low test positivity rate. Over here are very high test positivity rates, okay? So just kind of follow this trend line. As the PCR test positivity rate goes up, going from left to right, look what is happening to the mortality per million. In general, that is also increasing. So for the most part, I'm going to write a statement like this. As PCR test positivity percentage, symbol for that, increases, the mortality rate per million people also increases. And I have a simple sentence that describes the relationship between the independent variable, which is PCR test positivity percentage, and the mortality rate or death rate per million people. Okay, so when you get to that part, all you're really doing at a basic level is writing a statement that describes the relationship based on what you see. Okay, the next one's going to be down here, scatterplot number 2, and this one we're going to do as a class with some of your own input. So at this point, the video is going to cut, and we'll kick it over to your teacher, whether that be me or someone else. Thanks for listening. Hope you learned a little something. See you next time.